Before Ben Wallace was feared across the NBA, he was just a kid from Whitehall, Alabama, one of the poorest towns in America. The 10th of 11 children, raised by a single mother, he had to fight for everything. Even his first basketball games were battles. Playing with his older brothers, he wasn't past the ball. To touch it, he had to steal it or rebound it. This was where the blueprint for Big Ben was born. At 16, Ben was already hustling, cutting hair on the porch for $3 a cut. He had a relentless work ethic, one that extended to sports. He was an all-state athlete not just in basketball, but in football, baseball, and track and field. Still, there was no guarantee he'd make it out of Alabama. He was undersized and from a small town. No scouts were calling, but fate had other plans. In 1992, NBA tough guy Charles Oakley held a basketball camp just 100 miles from Ben's home. Ben showed up, rebounded like a madman, blocked shots, dunked everything in sight. Oakley noticed. He even challenged Ben to a one-on-one and punched him in the face during the first play. Ben Wallace. He hit me in the lip. Split it. So I hit him right back. Oakley loved the fire. From that day on, he became Ben's mentor, guiding him to Cuyahoga Community College and later to Virginia Union. At Virginia Union, Ben's drive became legendary. He worked so hard the school had to buy extra weights. He averaged 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks, leading the team to the Division II Final Four. But when the 1996 NBA draft came, silence. Undrafted. Despite the muscle, the heart, and the hustle, teams thought he was too short, too raw, and too limited offensively. Boston gave him a training camp invite, but they played him out of position and cut him. Italy gave him a shot, but he only lasted 2 weeks. Then a lifeline. Wes Unseld of the Washington Bullets saw something others didn't. Maybe because Unseld himself was an undersized Hall of Fame center. He brought Ben back from Europe and gave him a spot. It wasn't glamorous. Wallace was the 12th man. He averaged just 1 point and 2 rebounds. But his fire? Unmatched. He wasn't in the NBA to fill a roster spot. He was there to dominate. And this was only the beginning. Ben Wallace clawed his way into the NBA, but the real test was staying there. After barely making the roster for the Washington Bullets, he averaged just 6 minutes per game. Most would have faded away. But not Ben. While others took it easy in practice, he treated every drill like Game 7 of the finals. Teammate, you'd think he was fighting for his life. Every day. By year 3, things started to shift. In the lockout-shortened 1999 season, Wallace got 27 minutes per game. He responded with 8 rebounds and 2 blocks a night. His offense? Still nearly non-existent. But defensively, he was becoming a wall. Still, the Wizards weren't winning, and Wallace was seen as expendable. So they traded him to Orlando. There, things got brutal. Wallace played with a stress fracture in his foot for half the season. He'd limp around in a medical boot until 25 minutes before tip-off, take it off, go to war, and strap it back on when the final buzzer sounded. Monty Williams, we'd think we were tough until we saw Ben. He was a machine. Despite the pain, Wallace put up 8 rebounds and 1.6 blocks per game in limited minutes. But once again, he was undervalued. Then came the moment that changed everything. When Grant Hill made it clear he wanted to leave Detroit, the Pistons proposed a trade to Orlando, Hill for some salary relief, and a throw-in named Ben Wallace. Orlando agreed. Big mistake. In Detroit, Ben unleashed the full fury of his game. His first season, he led the team in rebounds, blocks, and steals, something no one in Pistons history had ever done. Not even Dennis Rodman. And he didn't stop there. Wallace pushed himself like a madman. So much so that the team had to adapt to him. GM Joe Dumars built the entire roster around Ben's defense-first mentality. In an age where everyone worshipped scoring, Detroit bet everything on defense. Joe Dumars, he brought an intensity that changed everything. We didn't just want players, we wanted warriors like Ben. The Pistons brought in Richard Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, and drafted Tayshaun Prince. All tough, all defensive-minded, all inspired by Wallace. Ben averaged 13 rebounds and 3.5 blocks per game, while standing under 6 feet 9 inches. That year, he won his first Defensive Player of the Year award, receiving 116 out of 121st place votes. The Pistons beat the Raptors in Round 1, first playoff series win in 11 years, but lost in Round 2 to Boston. Still, Ben had made a point: defense wins games. And he was the embodiment of defense. By 2003, Ben was untouchable. He led the NBA in rebounds, made the All-Star team, and repeated as Defensive Player of the Year. But the biggest hit came off the court. Just days before the All-Star game, Ben's mother, Sadie, suddenly passed away. It crushed him, but he still showed up. He played in her honor. And what followed was one of the most dominant stretches of his career. Ben averaged nearly 15 rebounds and 3 blocks the rest of the season. He had an 8-game stretch with over 21 rebounds per game. In one game against the Celtics, he grabbed 28 rebounds, only 2 less than the entire Boston team. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't a scorer. But in Detroit, he was a hero. He had gone from undrafted to unstoppable. But the best was yet to come. By 2004, Ben Wallace was no longer just a cult hero. He was the cornerstone of one of the most feared defensive teams the NBA had seen in decades. But even as Detroit dominated on defense, they still lacked the final piece to complete the puzzle. That piece arrived in February 2004, Rasheed Wallace. With Rasheed joining the front court, Ben finally had backup. The Pistons now had length, toughness, and smarts across the board. Tayshaun Prince was the silent killer. Chauncey Billups was the floor general. Rip Hamilton ran defenders ragged. But it was Big Ben who anchored it all. Detroit's defense suffocated teams. They held opponents to just 84 points per game. In a league obsessed with scoring, the Pistons were redefining dominance by stopping it. Detroit crushed the Bucks. Then, they met the Nets, the team that had swept them the year before. Not this time. This time, Wallace made sure history didn't repeat. Detroit beat New Jersey in 7 grueling games. Next, the Indiana Pacers, the top seed. Their bitter rivals. The series was a slugfest. Points were rare. Fights were frequent. But Ben Wallace set the tone, controlling the paint, snatching rebounds like a man possessed, and mentally intimidating every opponent who dared enter the lane. In 6 games, Detroit overcame Indiana. And just like that, they were in their first NBA Finals since 1990. But waiting for them? The dynasty. The Giants. The Los Angeles Lakers. Vegas gave the Pistons a 13% chance to win the series. The Lakers were stacked with Hall of Famers. Everyone predicted a sweep. Detroit didn't flinch. Ben Wallace made a statement. The Pistons won Game 1 on the road, shocking the Lakers. Game 2 went to LA, but when the series shifted to Detroit, Wallace raised his intensity to another level. Game 3, Pistons win by 20. Game 4, Shaq drops 36 and 20, but the Pistons still win. Why? Because Ben Wallace was the only man on earth who could guard Shaq one-on-one. Detroit didn't double. Wallace took the punishment. Elbows, shoves, body slams, and kept coming. Game 5, Wallace's masterpiece. 18 points, 22 rebounds, 3 steals. The Pistons crushed the Lakers and stunned the basketball world. Announcer voiceover. The Detroit Pistons have done the unthinkable. Your 2004 NBA champions. Despite Chauncey Billups winning Finals MVP, it was Wallace who had been the soul of the team. The anchor. The reason Detroit's defense could do the impossible. Shaq was 5 inches taller and 100 pounds heavier. Yet Ben out-rebounded him in the series and disrupted LA's offense so thoroughly that the Lakers averaged just 82 points per game, 16 fewer than their season average. He didn't score much. He didn't talk much. But he was everywhere. Steals, blocks, tips, stops. Wallace led all players in rebounds and steals in the playoffs. As a center. That's unheard of. The next year, Ben won his 3rd Defensive Player of the Year award. The Pistons returned to the finals to face Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs. It was one of the most defense-heavy finals in history. Neither team averaged over 86 points per game. Wallace did everything, 3 blocks per game, nearly 2 steals. But Duncan edged him out. The Spurs took the series in 7. Still, Wallace had proven once again that he could dominate a game without even scoring. And in 2006, with a new coach and Detroit's best regular season record ever, 64 wins, Ben won his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award, tying the all-time record. Ben Wallace. I don't play for stats. I play to win. That's all I ever cared about. But after another run to the conference finals, where Shaq finally got his revenge with the Miami Heat, Wallace's time in Detroit came to an end. The Chicago Bulls offered more money and Wallace made the move. He wasn't just a defensive anchor. He was the heart, the symbol, the soul of a champion. He never averaged double digits in scoring. He couldn't hit a free throw to save his life. And he wasn't even drafted. But none of that mattered. Because Ben Wallace changed the game without needing the ball in his hands. He dominated in silence, through sweat, sacrifice, and sheer force of will. In 2006, Wallace made history by tying Dikembe Mutombo for the most Defensive Player of the Year awards ever. That same year, Detroit finished with 64 wins, the best season in franchise history. He was the core of a system, the beating heart of the Pistons, and the soul of a city that thrives on hustle. But basketball is also a business. In the offseason, the Chicago Bulls made Wallace an offer he couldn't refuse. The Motor City said goodbye to its warrior. The Afro left Detroit. Though Wallace still impacted games in Chicago and later in Cleveland, the years wore on. The explosiveness dimmed. The stats dipped. But the grit? That never changed. In 2009, Wallace came home. back to Detroit. Back to the hardwood that made him a legend. He wasn't there to chase records. He was there to give back, to finish his story where it began. He retired in 2012, 16 seasons, 1 championship, countless moments of awe. Let the numbers speak. 2 times NBA rebounding champion. 2 times NBA blocks leader. 4 times NBA All-Star. 4 times NBA Defensive Player of the Year. 5 times All-NBA Defensive First Team. Over 10,000 rebounds. Over 2,000 blocks. More steals than turnovers. More blocks than personal fouls. 5th all-time in defensive rating. The only undrafted player ever inducted into the Hall of Fame. Ben Wallace, stand tall. Stick your chest out. Hold your head up. Now do it again. Ben Wallace wasn't supposed to make it. He didn't follow the script. He wrote his own. And it became one of the greatest underdog stories in sports history. He proved that stats don't tell the whole story. That defense matters. That heart is bigger than hype. He proved that legends don't always score. Sometimes, they just show up and shut you down. Big Ben wasn't just feared. He was respected, revered, immortal. Ben Wallace, the greatest undrafted player of all time.